I'm Mike.
I'm Sam. Let's get into it.
Yeah, I have. I've heard it since I was in like seventh grade. So, but it's something that I've kind of embraced. And the guys, Kelsey, Tyreek, and those guys throw some shots at me, but don't worry, I throw shots back.
Welcome to episode 31. We got some sports news we're going to talk about today. Let's get right into it. So our first topic, pretty big news, not only in the sports world, but more of just the social change that's happening in the United States today. So obviously the Washington Redskins, a lot of people are calling for their name change, and this isn't even a new thing. I think people have been calling for the Redskins to change their name since kind of the conception of the Redskins organization in the late 60s. And then obviously nowadays, with all that's happening, and you have big companies like FedEx and Nike pressuring the Washington Redskins to change their names, it's finally seeming like it's going to be more of a realistic thing that's going to happen now. So obviously, Dan Snyder, the owner, who is probably one of the worst owners in all of sports, not just the NFL, is really kind of not really a fan of changing the Redskins name. So what are your thoughts on everything so far?
Yeah, I remember in 2012 there was a strong push for Dan Schneider to change a Redskins name, and he said he would never do it, very adamantly against it. And now he kind of said the Redskins organization, along with him, their GM Ron Rivera, now they're kind of under investigation to seek for a new name. And now I don't think they can really go back on their word. Now I think the pressure's on, especially with those big companies. Like you said, FedEx does own the naming rights to their stadium, which is huge. So if anything, at the very least, their stadium name is going to be changed. But I really do think in due time, in 2 years, 3 years, all just Redskins kind of logos, the name will be changed in light to this kind of social justice era we're kind of transitioning into. But I do think that we shouldn't entirely remove Native American kind of symbolism from our country, because I feel like Native Americans are so marginalized to begin with, and we kind of forget that they were the inhabitants of this great continent that we're on right now. So if they could end up changing the Redskins name to something that can both be racially sensitive and also just honor Native Americans, I think that would be the best move. But I don't think the Redskins should change their name to just something random that has nothing to do with Native Americans.
Yeah, I mean, I think I saw something that said the Blackhawks weren't going to change their name, rather they're going to honor Native Americans. So I think that the Blackhawks are going kind of a better route by
Yeah,
honoring them and kind of showing Native American pride. But the Redskins, obviously, it's not a tribe or anything positive
yeah.
for Native Americans. It's more or less a slur towards Native Americans. So I think that changing the names from Redskins to maybe a tribe, or even a complete 180 of a name change, would be beneficial. I mean, the Redskins are in a lot of turmoil within their own organization, as Dan Snyder is the majority owner, but the minority owner of 40% of the team. I think it's a coalition of three different guys. They're very unhappy with what's happening within their organization, and they're kind of considering selling their 40% ownership to someone else because they just don't want to be part of this. Because I know Dan Snyder, time in and time after, just seems to be a very greedy man and is more with the money and kind of just making himself rich, and rather than putting his organization first.
Yeah, and kind of going off that point with the money, I mean, this is huge for him because not only is rebranding just so expensive, he's going to have to tear down every single logo, every single name on the stadium, every single just product they've tried to market, every product they've tried to sell. I think it's huge that Nike ended up taking all Redskins memorabilia off their website, because I know right now, especially with COVID, the main way and the main source of revenue for these NFL teams are kind of sales from not even tickets necessarily, because tickets aren't even on sale, but just sales from jerseys and what have you. But now that the Redskins can't even really sell jerseys, they definitely do need to change this name very quickly, and they really do need to work on it. And it is going to be very expensive for them again, but I think to change the name to something again that would honor Native Americans like the Seminoles or something of that nature. I know I saw a movement on the internet that wanted to change the Redskins name to the Americans, because obviously there's the very famous hockey team, the Canucks, and obviously the Redskins playing our capital, something to represent our country, but just something that isn't Redskins, something that isn't just kind of blatantly kind of racist.
Yeah, I think the names that I've heard the most were Red Tails, Warriors, Generals, stuff along those lines. Red Tails seems a little kind of just like I don't know, just a little soft of a name. I don't know. It's not really an intimidating type name if you're playing against someone called the Red Tails. I would like to see the Warriors. That would be a nice game, a nice team name and good for marketing. But obviously you have the Golden State Warriors, so I don't know if that would kind of infringe on copyrights and stuff like that with the basketball organization. But I think something along the lines of also like with Washington D.C., you see the Capitals. I don't know if they would make like the monuments or something like that. I mean, what if the Redskins change their name to the Politicians or something like that? Just completely outlandish. I think they're gonna try to find something kind of below, kind of under the high end. I don't even know what I'm saying right now. They're gonna try to change their name not to be something very newsworthy, just something under the radar, I think.
Yeah, certainly. I agree with that. I mean, knowing the Redskins organization, they're going to do something low key and they're going to do something a little bit lame. Now, I do think that the Redskins, I mean, I think they are going to lose some fans from this, sadly, some more traditional fans, but I think potentially they can gain so many fans if they actually end up remarketing kind of their entire organization, changing their entire color scheme, changing their name, even changing maybe Washington, you can say DC. So, I think in that you can just really inspire a new identity for your football team, especially transitioning into the Ron Rivera era of football. Again, have so many more new fans because a lot of sports fans like gravitating towards something like the Golden Black Knights from Las Vegas, stuff of that nature. So I do think the Redskins potentially could profit from this if they do end up doing it right.
Yeah, I think it's going to usher in generation of fans for them, and just I think Dan Snyder worries about too much money, but I think changing the name to something more socially accepted would bring in a new level of money for him. So there's a positive in his mindset.
Yeah, and I mean, he's one of the most disrespected owners in all of sports, really, not even just the NFL world. So to do something to put a little bit of respect on his name also would be good for his team image and his own image as well.
Yeah. So moving on to our next topic, obviously the big news coming out of the football world, Patrick Mahomes with his record-breaking contract, passing Mike Trout as the largest contract in all sports. So with the contract, signing bonus, and all that, he'll make a little over $500 million. So that's over a 10-year extension. So looking at excluding the signing bonus, he'll make around $45 million per season for the next 10 years, and then adding kind of the signing bonus incentives and also the money he'll be making for the rest of his rookie deal. He'll be a very, very rich man. So what are your thoughts on this massive contract, and especially highlighting the 10-year extension, which is pretty unprecedented for inside the football world? I think this happens in other sports like hockey and baseball, but I don't think we've ever seen a 10-year extension inside football.
Yeah, I don't think I ever imagined seeing a 10-year extension in football, but I also never imagined there being a player such as Patrick Mahomes. But just getting into the 10-year extension kind of, I mean, the nature of football, just so much uncertainty, so much just, again, uncertainty from year to year. Just success really is so hard to carry over from year to year in the NFL. And the only player, the only organization that could really do that is an organization with a great quarterback year to year. We see defenses fall apart like Saxonville year to year. We even see offenses fall apart year to year, but the only thing that really is consistent in the NFL is quarterback play. So the only position, the only player that really would warrant a 10-year deal is the best quarterback in football, and that's what Patrick Mahomes is. So it really isn't surprising for the Chiefs organization to go ahead and give him this 10-year deal, and he's going to be locked up for the next 12 years because his 10-year deal does not actually start kicking in until the end of his rookie year deal, which is about 2 years from completion. So, I mean, it's just great for Patrick Mahomes. He's going to be almost a billionaire by the time he is hitting his 12th year on his contract, which is just absolutely insane.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it and you're like, wow, $45 million season, that's a lot of money. But if you look at it in hindsight, kind of in a couple of years, it's not going to be that much it'll be a lot, but it's not going to be the most in the league because the contracts for quarterbacks keep going up each year. I mean, you see someone like Kirk Cousins, the amount of money he makes. So, I mean, when Lamar Jackson's contract comes up, you can probably see him making maybe even more, or Joe Burrow, or someone who's not even a quarterback in the NFL, like Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields. I mean, obviously it is a lot of money, but I think the future of just football and contracts and all of sports going up like the way they are, you can see someone 5 years down the road, 3 years down the road, making substantially more than Patrick Mahomes is. I think Patrick Mahomes, he did take a bit of a pay cut for his worth, knowing that he really loves playing in Kansas City and really loves playing with Andy Reid as his head coach.
Yeah, it's certainly true. I don't think Andy Reid is going to end up seeing the end of this 10-year contract. I do think he's going to retire before then. But even then, I mean, it's so appealing for any coach in the NFL, any coach in the college world to know that you have Patrick Mahomes on such a big deal. You still, again, like you said, in hindsight, I think we are not going to necessarily say this deal was a bargain, but certainly more of a team-friendly deal. Again, in hindsight, I mean, look at 10 years ago, the highest paid quarterback was getting paid about $20 million, and now they're getting paid $45 million a year. I mean, we don't even know what the QB market is going to be in about 5 years. So, I mean, that's huge for Patrick Mahomes. I know he did say on ESPN today he didn't really want to cripple his entire team, his entire roster, his entire just cap space for the Chiefs organization with his deal. And I know that's laughable right now because, again, he just got the richest sports deal in just sports history, in American history. But still, I do think this deal is going to end up being good for the Kansas City Chiefs, and unless something catastrophic ends up happening to Patrick Mahomes, which I don't really foresee, but I don't hear a lot of people talking about. I mean, Patrick Mahomes has only played 2 seasons in the NFL, but these 2 seasons certainly are the most successful 2 seasons of really any player ever, I think, in his first 2 years. I can't really think of any other player who has had this much success in his first 2 years. I mean, he was a couple plays away from going to the Super Bowl last year, and this year, of course, he was a Super Bowl MVP.
Yeah, I mean, Nick Wright on Colin Cowherd's show yesterday said if Patrick Mahomes retired today, he would be a Hall of Famer already, which is a bit outlandish, but I can understand someone's argument when they're talking on behalf of Patrick Mahomes. But I can't see the Chiefs losing some of their key players like Chris Jones. I don't think they'll be able to sign Chris Jones because he is one of the best defensive tackles in all football. So I think he's going to ask for a lot of money. So I don't think he'll be a Chief in the next couple of years. But I don't know once kind of Travis Kelce's contract comes up or Tyreek Hill's contract comes up. I don't know what they're going to be able to do with that because of the money they are allocating towards Patrick Mahomes. I mean, the Colts did, when they gave their contract to Andrew Luck, kind of struggled to put some pieces, so they did have to get younger talent around him to have those rookie deals to be successful. And you always see teams in football giving their quarterbacks massive contracts and kind of struggling to put players around them because they are giving them so much money. So I don't know what's going to happen with the Chiefs down the road in a couple of years, but the way it turns out, or the way it's driving towards that, Patrick Mahomes isn't going to be the highest paid quarterback in all football in a couple of years. So who knows if money, the cap level goes up, that they are going to be able to keep these guys under contract.
Yeah, I certainly agree. I think they're going to have to take more of the Patriots route and kind of sign these plug-and-play players, these players in their 30s at the tail end of their career, trying to win Super Bowls. I don't think they're going to have too much success in the Colts kind of model of trying to draft these young players, and by the time their rookie deal ends up, either kind of let them walk, draft another replacement, or sign them to a bigger extension, which usually doesn't really work in the NFL if you try to go off that model. So again, I think the Chiefs, I mean, they're a great organization. They're a very traditional organization. They have a history of winning, but they hadn't won in 30, 40 years until this just past year. But again, they have a Hall of Fame coach. They have a potential Hall of Fame quarterback on a 10-year deal. So I do think they're going to be able to attract some older veterans, aging veterans who do want to capture that Super Bowl, and I do think that's going to have to be their route because they already have their star DN, like you said, Chris Jones. He's trying to hold out already. He wants another contract already. I know he's under the franchise tag, and he said he wouldn't play under the franchise tag. And the difference between Chris Jones and a guy like Le'Veon Bell is Le'Veon Bell's in his second year of his franchise tag, so he could really hold out. But Chris Jones, I mean, he still has what 2, 3 more years under kind of his contract rights with the Chiefs. So if he sat out next year, he could potentially sit out next year, which certainly would not be good for him, I don't think, or the Chiefs organization. But again, I know they just restructured Sammy Watkins' deal, and they're going to have to keep doing that for some great players that are going to walk through this organization because, again, a large part of Patrick Mahomes' success has been so many speedy weapons around him. So I don't think any quarterback in NFL history is good enough to absolutely carry an abysmal roster like, I don't know, Tom Brady tried to do last year with the Patriots. But again, if the Chiefs are able to surround him with pretty good talent, I think Patrick Mahomes is good enough to elevate the talent around him and still get it done and win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, I think the mindset of the ownership and the front office is very hands-on by constantly restructuring all the players' contracts on the team to be able to really keep their money where it should be. And then also just the mindset of we have Patrick Mahomes, we have Andy Reid, we'll be successful regardless. I think that's kind of more or less of their thinking in those two categories.
Yeah, and I do think the Kansas City Chiefs should start to prepare for the future. I do think they should maybe look into signing a young offensive coordinator to kind of groom under Andy Reid, show him the Andy Reid way, like Doug Peterson kind of did with the Philadelphia Eagles under Andy Reid in Kansas City. Again, groom him to be the next head coach for the future because Andy Reid isn't going to be a Kansas City Chief, in my opinion, for too much longer. I think if the Chiefs end up in 5 years kind of winning a Super Bowl, then I do think Andy Reid is going to ride off into the sunset and retire and be a Hall of Fame head coach. So again, I do think a large part of Patrick Mahomes' success could be attributed to his head coach. So I really do think scheme is so important in today's NFL. So again, they should groom the next kind of great head coach under Andy Reid.
Yeah, and then if you think about it for the Cowboys, this kind of really hurt the negotiations between the Cowboys and Dak because obviously he sees that Patrick Mahomes is getting so much money, and obviously he's not the same talent as Patrick Mahomes, but Dak seems to think he is, so he's obviously going to ask for so much more money, so it's going to really hurt the Cowboys' negotiation with him. So who knows? We might see Andy Dalton under center week 1 if nothing pans out.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I do think Dak Prescott is his own market in a sense, and I do think Patrick Mahomes is his own market in a sense. I don't think Dak Prescott has done anything in his career to warrant any type of money like that and any type of length of contract like that. I mean, I know even Dak Prescott, I don't think wants 5 years on his extension. I thought he only wanted 4, so I don't think any like 10-year deal is going to be happening with him or anybody in the NFL today for that matter anytime soon because no one has really proven what Patrick Mahomes has done. Again, first 2 seasons, Super Bowl MVP and regular season MVP. I mean, it's absolutely unprecedented. Over 70 touchdowns in his first 2 seasons. So Dak Prescott can't even really match with that. So I don't think it's going to kind of have an effect on Dak Prescott's contract negotiations in the immediate sense, but maybe in a year, 2 years, if Dak proves more, if the Cowboys go farther in the playoffs, if they potentially even win a Super Bowl next year, then yeah, I do think it could end up kind of hurting the Cowboys in this contract negotiation because they already did give out huge deals to guys like Amari Cooper, guys like Ezekiel Elliott. So that really is the problem with the Cowboys. They could have gave Dak Prescott a huge contract extension, but they already gave a huge extension to so many talented players on that roster to the point where they really just have no more money.
Yeah. And just looking at the history of all the NFL, are there any athletes that pop out to you that deserve tenured contracts?
Yes, sir.
It's really hard to think anybody outside of the quarterback position, but go ahead.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, the first guy that comes to mind for me that I think in NFL history would deserve a 10-year contract was Tom Brady in 2005. I mean, he was coming off of just getting paid so little of the salary, obviously a 6th-round pick. He was only getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars, not even getting paid $1 million. So if you look at it in that light and then just kind of look in 2005, I know Tom Brady was already 28, but his game really just did not rely on mobility. You didn't even really need hindsight with Tom Brady's game to know it was going to age very well. He just does all the little things right. He does all the hard mental aspects of the game right. So Tom Brady, I think in 2005, again, coming off of a three-time Super Bowl champ, three championships in 4 years. I mean, to be one of the youngest quarterbacks of all time with three Super Bowl champions under his belt already, I think it would have been warranted to give Tom Brady, again, in 2005, that 10-year contract. And to see what it would have done in hindsight, it would have gone again from 2005 to 2015. And in between that time, the Patriots actually had so much AFC success, but they didn't really have any Super Bowl success. But still, Tom Brady from that time was one of the best quarterbacks in the league year in and year out and never had a losing record. So I do think Tom Brady, in hindsight and at that time, deserved the 10-year contract.
Yeah, I think when you're looking at which quarterbacks would deserve a 10-year contract, I think Peyton Manning and Tom Brady are the first two that come into mind because they did play for the Patriots and the Colts respectively for so long and had such successful tenders. But obviously, when you're looking at the case of Peyton Manning, if you delayed the contract, say giving him the contract in 2006 when they won the Super Bowl, but obviously his injury did come in that 2006 season. Apparently, when he played the Redskins, he took kind of a nasty hit. So obviously, say you give Peyton Manning that 10-year contract. Fast forward, he needs neck surgery, which is speculate, which is career ending. But obviously, knowing now what we know, it's not career ending. But the Colts do cut him. But that's why I'm not a fan of giving quarterbacks or any football player a 10-year contract because, say, Peyton Manning's on top of the world as the best quarterback in the league or the second best quarterback in the league, arguably with Tom Brady, and then he gets hurt. Now you're wasting that massive contract and the amount of money that he would be potentially getting. But obviously, Peyton Manning, his time with the Colts, won Super Bowls, was one of the best quarterbacks in the league, sat atop the AFC despite Tom Brady and kind of beat him in the playoffs year after year. But Peyton Manning is one of those quarterbacks that I would arguable to give a 10-year contract.
Certainly, I think with these 10-year contracts with these quarterbacks, they need to have proven already in their young career that they're already great. They can already be winners. So I think 2006 would potentially be even a little bit too late for Peyton Manning because, I mean, already by the year 2000, in 3 years, he was already one of the best quarterbacks in the league. I mean, he's coming off of a season in 2000 with the most yards thrown in the NFL, the most touchdowns thrown in the league. I mean, year 1 to year 2, the Colts from a 13-3 record to a 3-13 record to a 13-3 record, which is just absolutely unprecedented. That's absolutely amazing. I mean, in 2000, Peyton Manning was only 26 at the time, so at the end of his tenure, he would have been 36, of course, from 2000 to 2010. So again, I think with these 10-year contracts, really the main purpose for these organizations are not even to necessarily lock down their great player, but just to, in the future, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, to have a very team-friendly deal for your quarterback because you're going to predict that the market is going to drastically spike. And we saw from 2010 to 2020, again, the quarterback market drastically spiked, not even so much so from 2000 to 2010. So again, with a guy like Peyton Manning, I think 2006 would have been a little bit too late to give him a 10-year contract, but if you wanted to give it to him 3 years into his deal, like we see with Patrick Mahomes, he's already proven he's going to be a great quarterback, one of the greatest of all time. So again, with a guy like Peyton Manning, I think I would have given him a 10-year contract a little early on to his career. So they still have that kind of leeway to see where his health is at in 2010 and kind of reevaluate the situation like they ended up doing a couple of years later.
Yeah, and then kind of continuing with the trend of Patrick Mahomes, someone in the league today, I think Russell Wilson would completely warrant a 10-year contract. Going back to their Super Bowl win or their Super Bowl loss against the Patriots, I think he just showed how great he was and how much of a team leader he is. And then obviously I think he went to another level the past couple of years about how good he really is at quarterback. So going back to when those two Super Bowl teams, I think they could have restructured his contract after those and gave him a 10-year contract because he is completely worthy of a 10-year contract and being part of the Seahawks because I think if you think about it right now, he is probably the greatest Seahawk of all time, just
Yeah, he
the
is.
accomplishments he's able to achieve and just leading those teams to the playoffs the past couple of years, which are not great football teams. He kind of just willed them, put the team on his back. So I think he's completely warranted a 10-year contract if you look at his career so far.
Yeah, I know Steve Largent and company in the 70s put together some pretty good Seahawks teams and in the early 80s. But besides that, I mean, all of the relevant Seahawks kind of history has been really in the 2000s with Hasselbeck losing a Super Bowl and really mainly, of course, in the 2010s with Russell Wilson winning a Super Bowl, Legion of Boom, just that great team. Now, right now, again, like I stated kind of when we're talking about Patrick Mahomes more, I think he's the only one in today's NFL in 2020 that warrants a 10-year contract. I think I'd be hesitant to give Russell Wilson a 10-year contract right now just because he would be in his 40s by the time the contract ended. But looking into 2013 for Russell Wilson, I think at that time it would be appropriate because, I mean, he had already led the Seahawks to a Super Bowl victory. He had never had a losing season at that point. I mean, in 2013, again, he was 25 years old. He had already shown just great flashes of greatness. He was already one of the most efficient, if not the most efficient quarterback in the entire league when it comes to touchdown to interception ratio, just really taking care of the football. So I do think Russell Wilson in 2013, again, would have warranted a just great 10-year contract because, I mean, it would have expired in 2023. He would only be 35. And again, I think it would be still time to give him yet another extension, maybe a 3-year extension, 4-year extension.
Yeah, definitely Russell Wilson is just so special and completely underrated, I think. But I'll ask you this question. Is there any non-quarterback that you would warrant a 10-year contract? The only players that really come to my mind, I wouldn't give them a 10-year contract, but just looking at longevity, the only players that really come to my mind are Adrian Peterson or Larry Fitzgerald because they have played for their respective organizations for so long.
Yeah, I mean, potentially Larry Fitzgerald in the 2000s, if you can get him on a very friendly deal. But again, I mean, those positions just really don't warrant to take such a chunk, to take such just a big hole of the salary cap. I mean, even looking at a guy like Adrian Peterson, I mean, he has had various injuries, various just reasons to miss seasons. I think he missed 2 full seasons with the Vikings in his kind of tenure with them. But again, I don't think any quarterback or any non-quarterback really can warrant a 10-year contract because again, even with Larry Fitzgerald, even in without hindsight, there's so much uncertainty. Is he going to get injured? How many wins and losses is he going to contribute to your team? And he's proven to be a top 10 quarterback of all or a top 10 wide receiver of all time, but still really contributes to virtually no wins and losses for the Arizona Cardinals come regular season, kind of game in and game out. So again, it would have to be a player that could really carry a roster, a depleted roster around him. And the only position that is able to do that is quarterback. And I mean, even looking at quarterbacks, looking at Russell Wilson, who we were just talking about, got a pretty major contract a couple years ago. I believe it was about a 5-year extension. I mean, and in lieu of that contract, basically the entire Legion of Boom ended up walking. There's really no members of that just great defense left except for Bobby Wagner, maybe. But again, even Russell Wilson with a very depleted roster, a Seahawks team that I think year in and year out, ever since that kind of double doink game where they ended up winning against the Vikings with Blair Walsh, that kind of infamous game. I think a lot of people forget that that was kind of the season where the Seahawks lost everyone. They struggled through that entire season, barely squeaked into the playoffs, and just barely squeaked past that playoff game. And I really do think that's been a pattern for the Seahawks ever since they lost the Super Bowl to the Patriots and gave Russell Wilson that huge contract. They've struggled through the regular season at times, and they've struggled in virtually every single playoff game they've played, win or loss. Even looking at last year, I mean, they're struggling to pull away from a very just depleted roster and an injury riddled roster in the Philadelphia Eagles. Even with Carson Wentz down for the majority of the game, they still needed a late huge catch by DK Metcalf to end up winning that game. So, I mean, even we're going to see in hindsight, is Patrick Mahomes able to drag a maybe even subpar roster to a Super Bowl? So that's yet to be seen.
Yeah, I think with non-quarterbacks, it's just really hard to tell, giving them a 10-year contract, looking down the road, are they going to be able to sustain the productivity that they are at the point of them giving the contract, and are they going to be able to stay healthy? Because, like you said, Adrian Peterson, although he was on the Vikings from, I think, 2007 to 2018, I think, he did have that ACL injury. He did have a couple injuries. I mean, it's just not warranted giving just the wear and tear on those type of players. But I think I would understand someone giving Adrian Peterson a 10-year contract because just how long he did play and how good he was. Because coming out of college, I mean, coming out of high school, people said he could have played in the NFL right now because he was just that physically gifted. But yeah, just even giving a quarterback a 10-year contract, it just completely depletes the roster. It's so hard to build a sustainable roster around them. That's why, I mean, we saw Tom Brady taking pay cut year after year just to be able to get some talent around him on the defensive side, not necessarily the offensive side of the ball, but they did get talent around the defensive side of him to help them win games. That's why it's just giving these massive contracts is so hard for teams to be successful with.
Yeah, and I mean, if I was an owner and I wanted to give my quarterback a 10-year deal, kind of the first thing I would think is their game indicative of being good when they're older? So that's why I look at a guy like Lamar Jackson in a couple years, and I really don't see him getting a 10-year contract, or I personally wouldn't even give him a 10-year contract just because there's so much uncertainty with his game, how it's going to end up aging. Even a guy like Deshaun Watson, Carson Wentz, I mean, they're more mobile quarterbacks. They get hit quite a lot, a scary amount. In fact, they really have a problem. We talked about that in our top 5 quarterback video of really holding onto the ball way too long. So I would need a quarterback who just has the physical gifts and kind of the mental aspect of football to know for a fact that they're going to be good in 10 years. They're still going to be playing at a very high level in 10 years. And so really, when I thought about that, 2 players came to mind, not even Peyton Manning and Tom Brady right off the bat, because they're a little bit lacking in just absolute physical ability. So I really looked at guys. Number one, Brett Favre in 1997. I mean, he was 28 at the time, which is pretty up there in age, but he just had his best season. He just won a Super Bowl. The next season he would go on to lose a Super Bowl. And looking at Brett Favre from 1997 to 2007, he'd end up spending the next 10 years on the Green Bay Packers anyways. And I mean, he's one of the best statistical quarterbacks of all time, but really going off my point with physical ability, Brett Favre has, in my opinion, the strongest arm in NFL history for any quarterback, stronger than Patrick Mahomes, stronger than Aaron Rodgers. I mean, if you really want to look at how strong Brett Favre's arm is, watch him play football when he's 41 for the Vikings. I mean, he's still absolutely zipping the ball in there. So looking at a guy like Brett Favre, I mean, again, he was such a winner. I know he did have some turnover problems, but he was a guy year in and year out that you can count on for being in the playoffs, no matter what the Packers roster was looking like, just because of his effect on the game and just because of his physical ability.
Yeah, I mean, looking at someone like Patrick Mahomes, Brett Favre, and even like John Elway from like 87 to 97, you could have given him a 10-year contract. They do run around the top pocket and they do find time, but when need be, if like their game changes and the NFL changes, they could become pocket passers because they do have such a great arm. They don't rely so heavily on scrambling outside the pocket like Lamar Jackson does, because those 3 quarterbacks that I named previously, they could rely on their arm and become pocket passers if need be. Like, I think that's why they're warranted the 10-year contracts, because they do have that arm.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, going off your point with John Elway, I wouldn't feel entirely comfortable with giving him a 10-year contract up to that point because, I mean, the point I was trying to make with Tom Brady in 2005, he had already won 3 Super Bowls. Peyton Manning in 2000, he hadn't won a Super Bowl yet, but, I mean, he was already one of the best quarterbacks in the league. He'd already really just had a drastic effect on wins and losses. But if you really look at John Elway, I mean, some of his Broncos teams were great in the late 90s, or of course in the late 90s as they won 2 Super Bowls, but in the late 80s there's still some great Broncos teams. Early 90s they're still great, but he proved to be very inefficient in terms of touchdown to interception ratio. But more importantly, I mean, he kind of came up short infamously in 3 straight Super Bowls he lost. He didn't lose 3 straight, but the first 3 Super Bowls he won to, he lost. So up to that point, I'd be a little bit hesitant to give John Elway a big 10-year contract. But again, his game, I mean, again, one of the strongest arms of all time, one of the most live arms of all time in John Elway. Certainly, I think you could make the case for him, but I'd fight back on it a little bit just because of the lack of overall team success. Looking at another quarterback that really does come to my mind is Aaron Rodgers in 2011. Of course, again, he was 28 at the time, just like Brett Favre was when I was kind of offering his contract out in 97. But he was arguably the best quarterback in the entire NFL at that point. He just won a Super Bowl. I mean, and Aaron Rodgers, looking at him in 2011, all of his best years really were ahead of him. I think he had another 6 or 7 years of being a top five quarterback. I would argue for the last 2 years he wasn't a top five quarterback. I know you still do think he is. A lot of people do think he is, but I mean, from a team standpoint for the Green Bay Packers, the deal would be extremely cheap in today's money. He would have been getting paid until 2021, which I think is pretty plausible for an end date for Aaron Rodgers' career. Looking at it right now with the draft of Jordan Love, I do think that the Packers, with this added cap space from a deal from 2011, could have potentially put together some better rosters for Aaron Rodgers to end up winning multiple Super Bowls instead of just one 2011.
Yeah, I mean, if the Packers did give Aaron Rodgers a 10-year contract after that Super Bowl victory, and let's just say the history of football just stayed completely the same the way it is now,
Yeah.
that would have been a complete flop of a 10-year contract because he's been injured year after year the past couple of years.
Yeah, it's true.
There hasn't been much success. I think them reaching the NFC Championship last year was the closest they have come to the Super Bowl since winning the actual Super Bowl. I mean, I think they've lost to the Falcons when they went to the Super Bowl in the divisional round. They did make some playoff runs, but completely just lack of success the past couple of years for the Packers.
Yeah, it's certainly true. I mean, and I know a big part of that has been because of Aaron Rodgers' kind of injury concerns. I know he just always tries to extend the play, and he's been, I know the famous one with Anthony Barr kind of falling on his collarbone. That's really been a pattern for Aaron Rodgers now. A lot of pulled hamstrings over the past couple of years. I know even last year he pulled his hamstring. So for Aaron Rodgers, certainly the end of his career is certainly much closer than we would imagine. Very intrigued to see which team he's going to end up playing on at the tail end of his career, because I do think a team like the Buccaneers potentially in 2021, 2022 can sign Aaron Rodgers to a 2-year deal. And I think he can have a Joe Montana Chiefs-esque kind of career on another team of being very successful on a very good roster.
Yeah, the Buccaneers just become that team that just harvests older quarterbacks because obviously the big news of signing Tom Brady. But if they get Aaron Rodgers, I mean, Aaron Rodgers still has the talent. I think his arm strength will always be there. So if the Buccaneers are able to get Aaron Rodgers in 2 years or however long Brady is there, I think they'll be able to be a successful team because they are putting the pieces around Brady. They're showing that they're able to put pieces around their older quarterbacks. So if they get Aaron Rodgers, I think they'll be a successful team as well.
I agree with that. I just really don't like Aaron Rodgers on the Green Bay Packers anymore. I really don't. I just think that there's really just a strong disconnect between Aaron Rodgers and kind of the Green Bay Packer front office, and especially between Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers. I think they have very different directions, kind of different views of where this team should go in the immediate sense and where this team should go heading into the future. Of course, drafting Jordan Love, drafting a running back to eventually even replace Aaron Jones, who was, again, like I stated in multiple podcasts, they're really MVP of their offense this year, even with Devontae Adams kind of getting into the 30s of his NFL career. So, I mean, looking at that Packers team again, just the lack of weapons around him, just the lack of talent around him. Now, finally, with that talent, but still not the best offensive talent. So I do think if you went to a team, even like the New Orleans Saints, who I don't think has their immediate answer, I think if he ends up going to a team like that, they can end up even winning a Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, I think for Aaron Rodgers to leave the Packers and go to another team, the team that signs kind of needs to be in a transition phase. I don't think they need to sign Aaron Rodgers to a 2-year deal and then be in the market for a quarterback in the draft. They can't kind of put all their eggs in one basket with Aaron Rodgers. I think they need to be looking forward in the future because obviously we see that with the Packers drafting Jordan Love. They're kind of putting the timeline on Aaron Rodgers within their Packer organization. But I think Aaron Rodgers just as a whole looking at his career, he's a very difficult person to coach.
Yeah.
He's had a very kind of he's very egotistical. It seems like I think he's very hard to just put players around him and stuff like that because it's just hard to make him happy no matter what you do.
Yeah, and I know we keep talking about these NFC South teams. We're going to end up doing an NFC South preview just in a couple minutes, but going off that point, I do think if Aaron Rodgers is with a coach like Bruce Arians, like Sean Payton, where they're older coaches, they have so much respect in this league. They have a track record of having absolutely great offenses with just great schemes. I think he would just be great with one of those coaches. But again, if you do bring in a guy like Matt LaFleur, a young coach who really hasn't had any respect given to him in this league thus far, because I mean this is a league where you earn respect as a head coach, and Matt LaFleur has had one good season, but besides that, really hasn't done anything else. So again, I do think that Aaron Rodgers would be an amazing fit with a team like the Saints in the future, and with a team like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who really like to push the ball down the field. And Aaron Rodgers, certainly at this point of his career, is a better deep ball thrower than Tom Brady. I think will be a better deep ball thrower than Tom Brady is in a couple years as well.
Yeah. So moving on to our last topic, obviously continuing the trend of the last couple episodes, we're going to preview the NFC South. So that is the Buccaneers, Falcons, Panthers, Saints. So you want to give us the kind of the backstory with this division and who they're going to be playing this year?
Yes, one of the most intriguing divisions in all football, arguably kind of the best quarterback carousel in all football, with Drew Brees with the Saints, obviously Tom Brady, the new Buccaneer, the Falcons with Matt Ryan, and then the Panthers are going to have a new quarterback here with Teddy Bridgewater. So this NFC South team, or just entire division, will end up playing the entire NFC North, so led by, of course, Aaron Rodgers and the Packers, like we're just talking about, and the Bears and teams of that nature, the Vikings, the Lions, and then they're going to end up playing the AFC West as well. So that's going to be very tough for them. Just some absolutely great games. I mean, every single quarterback, every single team in this division is going to be playing Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. Just some really good AFC West teams. So it should be very interesting for the NFC South. And every single NFC South team, whether in division or not, should certainly be a must-watch game.
Yeah, I think kind of the way they picked the divisions for them to play, I think they did kind of want to get that rake all the cash in they could by having Tom Brady play Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady playing Aaron Rodgers. I don't think that's happened much in their two careers with Aaron Rodgers and Brady playing against each other. So I think they're trying to get the most out of that new Tom Brady and the Buccaneers organization. But going into this division,
yeah,
I think the team that will win this division is the team that has won it the past couple of years. I think that's the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah.
I think they have one of the best rosters in all of football, but the Saints struggle is kind of not adding more talent each year. They kind of just stick around with the same roster.
Yeah.
They did sign Emmanuel Sanders, Malcolm Jenkins. They did draft Cesar Ruiz and Zach Bond, but outside of those four players I just listed, they haven't really improved the roster too much.
Yeah.
So although they do have a great roster, they do stay way too stagnant during the offseason, which that's why I could see them being overtaken at the top of this division by someone like the Buccaneers, or even taken over by someone at the top of the NFC by someone like the 49ers, like they did the past year, and the Packers, if they are able to perform the way they did last year. But as of right now, I'm going to go with the Saints at the top of the NFC South.
Yeah, I mean, you said stagnant, and that's really the theme for this entire division. Out of all the divisions we've done so far, and I think we'll end up doing, this NFC South had the least amount of transactions in the entire NFL in terms of players they lost and players they added. Now, obviously, the Buccaneers, everybody thinks they had the biggest offseason, but really, the only players that they brought in were Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski. Now, I do know those are two huge acquisitions, but they really did not add anybody else, didn't even really lose anybody else. And same with basically every team in this division. I know the Panthers have a huge kind of turnover on their coaching staff, which I'll get into in just a little bit. But kind of going off your point with the Saints, I've always said that there's really retraction from no addition in the NFL. So really, if you don't do anything in the offseason, if you have no moves and you win the division, you go 13-3 like the Saints did, not necessarily will their record get worse, but I do think their team is going to get slightly worse because, again, they did only bring in Malcolm Jenkins and Emmanuel Sanders, and I really don't think Malcolm Jenkins is too much of a great safety anymore. I think he's up there in age. I know his kind of role was depleting with the Eagles. I know his kind of just impact was not really that much there with the Eagles anymore after their Super Bowl victory. Again, you have Emmanuel Sanders. He's a really good veteran wide receiver who is going to be able to win one-on-one matchups for Drew Brees and the Saints. But again, I mean, all the Saints really did this offseason was that, like we just stated, they re-signed their two quarterbacks, Drew Brees and Taysom Hill. They did get another backup quarterback in Jameis Winston. Again, but no really significant losses. They did lose Teddy Bridgewater, who was a very good backup quarterback, and they drafted Cesar Ruiz again, like you stated. But I think he's a bit of a project center. I think there's a bit of a hole in that offensive line right now. But besides that, again, I do think the Saints will win the division as well. I do agree with you there. But I certainly do not see the Saints even going to the NFC Championship. I think at this point, I mean, their Super Bowl window did close. I don't think they're going to be winning a Super Bowl anytime soon. And if they are in the NFC Championship, it would really surprise me to see them end up being victors.
Yeah, I mean, the Saints fans always complain about them getting kind of the short end of the stick in playoff games, but I mean, when you look at it against the Rams a couple years ago, they had overtime and they lost that game. I mean, they had overtime and Drew Brees threw an interception to lose the game. I mean, and then in the Vikings just kind of outplay them with bigger plays in the game. So they do have a great roster, but they don't perform in the playoffs. That's why I don't see them being able to finish deep in the playoffs. I think they'll be able to kind of maybe get a bye week, maybe win a wild card game, but besides that, I don't see them going to an NFC Championship game, like you said.
Yeah, I think some news that kind of just flies under the radar with the Saints is that their running back Alvin Kamara seemed to regress last season. And I think with the regression of Alvin Kamara and just kind of this offense staying stagnant, staying the same the past couple of years, I do think we're going to see a slight dip in not only the win total for this team. I alluded that I wouldn't be surprised if they went 13-3, but I can see them only winning around 11 to 12 games. I know that's still a high win total. I think they still will win the division with that win total, but again, they're playing some tough NFC North teams. And I mean, if you get into week 15, week 16, week 17 with Drew Brees at quarterback, I mean, you're really teetering on not really being able to have an efficient passing game because you go up to the Windy City, you go up to Lambeau Field. It's going to be really hard for Drew Brees to pass for 25, 30 yards down the football field. And I think the Saints offense has the potential to have a bit of a regression this year because more NFL teams will kind of hone in on the short passing game and the intermediate passing game like the Saints have kind of been doing. But kind of getting off of the Saints here, which we do think will win the division, but I think the Buccaneers really, I know there's a huge hype train around them. I know there's some people that think, oh, they're not even that good. Some people think, oh, they're Super Bowl contenders. I think the truth kind of lies in the middle with this Buccaneers team. I do think they're going to fight neck and neck with the Saints for this division until the end of the year, really. I think we can see a Week 17 matchup that does decide this division between the Bucs and the Saints. But again, they were 7-9 last year with a quarterback in Jameis Winston who threw for 30 interceptions, which really is incredible. Tom Brady is going to bring such an element of just efficiency. He's going to just get all the 5-yard dump offs that the defense will allow them and just really mistake-free football for this Buccaneers team, which under Bruce Arians, really teams aren't used to seeing. So I think that's going to be great. I know Rob Gronkowski isn't going to have too much of an effect on this team, maybe a red zone target, but again, they tagged Shaq Barrett, who is one of the best pass rushers in the league. And they really had no key losses, which is huge because their defense was already pretty good last year with the additions of some rookies as well. So I mean, they did bring back JPP and then Ndamukong Suh. They did draft an offensive tackle in Tristan Wirfs, and they got one of my favorite defensive players of the entire draft in the second round in Antoine Winfield Jr. So I do think this Buccaneers team is really in store for an 11-win, 12-win season.
Yeah, I mean, I was ever so close to putting the Buccaneers at first, and first in this division, but I just think the Saints are a little bit better all around in their whole roster. But the Buccaneers, they did, like you said, they went 7-9 with someone who threw 30 interceptions last year.
Yeah.
Just having the mindset of Tom Brady, the efficiency, just the knowledge of the game, I think they are going to be able to go 11-5, 12-4. I mean, I just think that their defense is really, really underrated. I mean, they have they were really great front seven with JPP, like you said, Vita Vea, Ndamukong Suh, Shaq Barrett. They just have a great front seven. I think their secondary is a little questionable, but adding Antoine Winfield really could add some depth and help back there. But Tom Brady, throughout his whole career in New England, never had great wide receivers. I mean, he had Randy Moss and Wes Welker at one point, but having someone like Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Humphreys, I think is his name, drafting Tyler Johnson in Minnesota, he just great wide receivers around him and great talent like we've never seen him have before. So I think that they are going to be a force this year going into the 2020 season.
Certainly. I mean, one of the best really tight end rooms too, with OJ Howard, Cameron Brate, and now you are adding again a really good red zone target, somebody who can be an efficient blocker as well, in Rob Gronkowski. So definitely, I do think the Saints and the Buccaneers are going to be battling in this division, and I think those are the two only playoff teams from this division, because now we're going down to the Falcons and the Panthers. Again, the Falcons had 7 wins last season, just like the Buccaneers, but I mean, really the biggest move of their offseason this year, last year, and the year before, really, in my opinion, has been simply to just keep their head coach in Dan Quinn. I think Dan Quinn is one of the worst head coaches in the entire National Football League. I mean, he's ranked near dead last in defense year in and year out, and he's supposed to be a defensive coordinator. He's supposed to be this great defensive mind, and really the problem with the Falcons have been schematically. I mean, year in and year out, they have one of the most talented rosters in the NFL. Not only on the offense, of course, you have Matt Ryan. Now you brought in Todd Gurley. You trade for Hayden Hurst, the tight end from the Ravens. You signed Dante Fowler, who's a pretty good edge rusher. But you ended up losing Austin Hooper, who's a very good tight end for you. You lost Vic Beasley. You lost Desmond Trufant. You lost DeAndre Campbell. You lost Adrian Claiborne. And you lost Jack Crawford. So all the players I just named besides Austin Hooper were very key contributors on that defensive side, which really has so much talent again in all these players, but really were never used right in scheme. I think defense really is mainly about the scheme and playing as a cohesive unit than it is the individual parts and players. And again, that really has been the problem with not only the kind of Falcons defense, but the Falcons offense ever since Kyle Shanahan walked and ended up signing with the 49ers. So again, the Falcons, I think they take another regression in the 2020 season simply because they still have Dan Quinn as their coach. And I see no changes happening with this team. I see no playoff aspirations from this team until they fire Dan Quinn.
Yeah, I think the most astonishing thing about the Falcons, I'm pretty positive you can check me on this, but I'm pretty sure their whole offense is made of all first-round picks. They have a couple that aren't first-round picks, but just the talent that they have on their team and they're not able to make the playoffs just shows how bad of a coach Dan Quinn is.
Yeah.
So I think for the Falcons to make that next step to making the playoffs again, I mean, they haven't made the playoffs since they lost the Super Bowl against the Patriots. So firing Dan Quinn, I think they are going to be able to make that leap. So, I mean, last year I thought Dan Quinn was going to get fired at like the trade deadline, but he didn't. He keeps prevailing somehow. But in order for the Falcons to become a powerhouse in the NFL again and be known as the top of the NFC like they were at one point, they do need to fire Dan Quinn and hire another offensive coordinator, because whoever their offensive coordinator is does not know how to use their personnel. I mean, Julio Jones, for some reason, is just so mismanaged in the red zone. He's almost non-existent in the red zone, which is just terrible considering how big he is and how much talent he has.
Yeah, he should certainly be the best red zone target in the NFL by far. I mean, neck and neck with guys really like Mike Evans in this division. I mean, it's really just embarrassing that year in and year out he has such a low touchdown number just because he's so mismanaged. And I mean, even Matt Ryan, I think, is a Super Bowl capable quarterback. Obviously, we saw him win the MVP in 2016, really almost win a Super Bowl in 2016. But I mean, you look at some guys that have won Super Bowls in NFL history. I certainly think Matt Ryan is better than some of those guys. So again, I think the Falcons next year do have a very playoff capable roster, but just their culture and their coaching staff just is not indicative of playoff football whatsoever. So I'm really not counting on the Falcons doing anything. Now, I will note that the Falcons started off last season absolutely horrible, played most of the season absolutely horrible. I think they had a key loss against the Arizona Cardinals, and then ever since that loss, that kind of catapulted them into, I think, about a 5 or 6 game winning streak. So that's something to note. I know we're hyping up teams like the Broncos, who had the same record in 7-9, and the Falcons do have a 7-9 record and do have that late kind of season success we see some teams that ended up having big turnarounds from season to season having. So that is something to note. Again, if they can ride that momentum that they kind of ended off on last season, then it would be great. But it is a new league year. I mean, it's a new day one. So I do not think the Falcons end up going to be any playoff contenders in 2020. But kind of transitioning into our last team in this division in the NFC South is going to be the Panthers. And I really did love the Panthers offseason. No really flashy signings, getting a guy like Teddy Bridgewater, but their main additions really to me are bringing in head coach Matt Rule, who was a great coach in college football, really just instilled great cultures to every program he went into. And then arguably just as big as bringing in Matt Rule, I think, is bringing in Joe Brady, the LSU offensive coordinator, for this great Joe Burrow kind of 60 touchdown run that LSU ended up going on, the most prolific just passing season from an NCAA team in history. So I really do think that the foundation is there for the Panthers. I think they're really going in a great direction. And with the signing of Teddy Bridgewater, I really do think it's a win-win situation for Matt Rule, because just at the worst, Teddy Bridgewater plays like he really played with the Vikings, and that was really subpar quarterback play, kind of game manager play. And Matt Rule could kind of say, well, I don't have the QB, I need a rookie QB, and he's going to end up drafting a very good rookie quarterback in sometime in the future, I would predict. And then he could kind of ride out his contract with that rookie QB and get re-signed or fired with whoever he drafts. So really a win-win situation with him there. I mean, if Teddy Bridgewater ends up being a good quarterback for him, then it makes Matt Rule look even better. He was able to succeed with kind of a game manager type quarterback. But getting into their offseason a little bit more, they did draft Derek Brown. They signed Robbie Anderson. I know they did lose both of their quarterbacks in Kyle Allen, who showed a lot of potential to be a good backup quarterback, and Cam Newton. So that's really the main news out of the Panthers.
Yeah, I think the Panthers are a little too young and a little too fresh to make the playoffs to be a good team this year. But I think fast forward in a couple of years, I think they can be at the top of this division, because this division is so old if you look at the Saints and the Buccaneers. But I really like Matt Rule, Joe Brady, kind of the wizard behind Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow first year, kind of mediocre he was, getting an offseason under Joe Brady. He was able to become the best single-season quarterback of all time in all of college football. I don't think that's arguable, but I think Teddy Bridgewater is going to be that transition quarterback for them. Have him for 1 year or 2 years, and then draft someone next year or the year after. Getting someone like Justin Fields under center after this year would be great for them, because Matt Rule would be able to get his own quarterback in there. But I think looking at the Panthers draft and looking at the history of the Panthers under Ron Rivera, they were a very defensive-oriented team, and they lost those players. But looking at their draft, they got Derek Brown, they got Yetur Gross-Matos. I don't know if I mispronounced that. And they strictly drafted defense. So they're obviously trying to string a defensive team together like they did when they made the Super Bowl, because they had Luke Kuechly, they had Thomas Davis. They did have a very strong defense, but having Matt Rule address defense, and then also just having Matt Rule assess defense, and then having Joe Burrow kind of put his mindset in the offensive side, shows that they're really kind of putting together the players they want in their own type of organization. So although the Panthers are going to be at the bottom of this division, I think they're going to go through some growing pains, but in the future, there will be a very good team.
Yeah, I think they can potentially be the third seed in this division, but I would predict that they are the fourth best team in this division. I do think the hierarchy of this division is going to go almost exactly like it did last year, but I do think, again, the Buccaneers are going to be a playoff team. But kind of looking at the Panthers, they kind of scream a fringe bottom 10, bottom 12, bottom 15 team in the NFL just by the way this team is constructed. I mean, you have guys, again, you sign guys like Teddy Bridgewater, you sign guys like Robbie Anderson, and these are players. If these are your main kind of players on offense, along with a great player like Christian McCaffrey, of course, you're not going to win 2 or 3 games, but you're not going to win 8 or 9 games as well. I really do think they're building their roster smartly to consistently over the next 3 years win around 6 games, win around 7 games, win around 5 games to still get top 10 picks, still get great players like Derek Brown out of Auburn, but still instill kind of a winning culture into your football program. So I really do think that that's exactly what Matt Rule is going to be doing. I don't see any tanking going on from the Panthers, but I certainly don't see a playoff push happening from this team. Again, I do think this is a team the next 3 years who is going to try to win every single game, is going to put their players in the best position to win every single game. I just don't think this team has the talent to win every game yet, and I don't think that's really the goal of Matt Rule and this organization just yet.
Yeah, I think Matt Rule is going in kind of with the college mindset. Obviously, when you take over a college team, you don't have your recruits in there, so you're not going to be as successful. But once you saw that with him at Baylor, he was able to get his recruits in there, and they were able to become. They lost the Pac-12 or the Big 12 championship last year, and they won 11 games. Showed how good they were in their huge turnaround. So with Matt Rule becoming the head coach of the Panthers and getting his players in there and the players he wants, he's able to kind of put in the mindset and the culture he wants with the Panthers and able to have them really turn around and become a great team.
Yeah, I mean, you look at a team in college football like Baylor, too. I still wasn't even overly impressed with some of the talent they had on that roster. And for Matt Rule to kind of bring that team, like you said, to an 11-win season, that's very impressive. And I mean, even looking at LSU, again, arguably the greatest college football season of all time, certainly the greatest passing season of all time. I mean, he really schemed around a subpar, just kind of an average offensive line in the SEC, one of the most competitive, if not the most competitive kind of division in all of college football. I know you had a lot of great offensive weapons like Clyde Edwards-Helaire. You had Jamar Chase. Obviously, you had a great quarterback. But again, I'm really impressed with with what Joe Brady did with that LSU offense, which really has been dormant the last 10 to 15 years, and really what Matt Rule has done with his college programs with Baylor.
Yeah. So quickly running through our little preview. So I have the Saints, Buccaneers fighting for the top of this division, and then the Falcons, Panthers at the bottom. And I can see, like you said, I can see them fighting for the bottom of the division. But I do think the Falcons are a little bit better and have more talent on their roster, so I can see them. I will see them. I'll place them at third in this division and the Panthers at last.
Yeah, me too. I really foresee, again, a similar hierarchy in this division and really a similar win-loss total, except for the Buccaneers. I do see the Saints winning around 12 games. I do see the Buccaneers winning around 11. I would not be surprised to see the Falcons end up 7-9 this season, but I would predict them to go a little bit worse than that. And then with the Panthers, I do think they're going to win around 5 to 6 games.
Yeah. So thank you everybody for watching. We hope you enjoyed. Let us know what you think about the NFC South division. We'll see you in the next one.